to create the controller and the views, normally what I do is I do scaffolding because they're automatically generated. It'll work perfectly, and then you just have to tweak it to make it look how you want. However, I am going to show you scaffolding, but we're going to be adding another class, and I will show you scaffolding for the new class that we add. For this movie class, we are going to manually create the home controller and some views. But the good news is that I'm going to give you some code for that. So we're going to be modifying the home controller to start with. And referring to the book for this. So I'm going to open up controller and view my home controller. And I am going to have it pull in the movie list models. And we do want this to have some access to our database. So we have to add some lines here. And we're going to put it above the index action method. And so we're going to have movie context. Call this context. And we're going to do the get set. And then we'll have public home controller. Movie context. I'm following what the book wants us to have here. They want us to call it CTX. And that is going to set our private context equal to CTX. And we did this in our earlier programming classes. It just basically hides, it gives you public access to the context, and it hides the private inner workings of the context. If you guys remember that from earlier in your C#. Then for the index, you're going to change this just a little bit. So we're going to create a variable called movies, and movies is going to store a list of the movies. So we'll take our context dot movies. We're going to add the order by, which is a link query. And we're going to sort this by name. Oops, I love it when it changes my code. Okay, so we are sorting by name, and then we're going to throw it in a list. Okay, and so that sorted list is going to go into movies. And we need an arrow here. This is a lambda. Okay. And then we're going to take this movie object here, sorted list, and we're going to pass that over to the view. Okay, so this is interfacing with our database. It is retrieving all of the movies. It is sorting them by name, putting them in a list, which is a collection, if you guys remember, and it's storing all of that in movies. Let me save this. So now, obviously, I'm sending this list to the index view. So I'm going to have to change that index view because our current index view is not expecting a list. And so it's because we're going to now be getting data um, from the controller, we need to connect it to the model. And so we have a list coming in, and our data type is going to be the movie class. And let's see, so there's other changes that we need to make here, quite a few. So I'm going to pause and make the changes. So what we've done here is we pulled in the model and we've now connected the list with that model. Okay, and if you remember, we are passing it here. And then at the top of the page, we're going to have a link to add a new movie. And this is going to a movie controller that we have not created yet. So when we create the movie controller, we're going to call it movie controller, okay, with no S, it's just going to be movie controller. And we're going to have to create an add index method or an add action method, okay, because that's what this is expecting. Then you can see we've got a little table that we've created. So in the table, we have a heading row. And this should look familiar because this is what we have in our movie class. We're going to show them name, year, and rating. They don't need to see the ID. Okay. And then in the body, it's going to go through every row in the list and it's going to display the data. So at movie, so here we've got variable movie in model. This is a for each, so it's going to automatically iterate through every item that's in that model, and we can refer to each item as movie. So we have to say at movie dot name, at movie dot year, at movie dot rating. That'll give us the actual data to display. And then you'll notice the last column has links to edit and delete. Editing and deleting require a movie ID. So there's quite a bit going on here. Um, we're referring to this new movie controller that we haven't created yet. Um, in addition to having an add action method, we also need an edit and a delete. The edit and delete action methods um, need to bring in the ID, the movie ID. Otherwise, how do you know which one to change or which one to delete? So the movie ID that is associated with the data that is displaying is what would get passed. Okay, and it gets passed as an ID. So you can see that it's going to be part of the route, which is part of the address, the web address. It's going to get passed and it'll get pulled into those action methods as IDs. Okay, so that's kind of what's going on here. And even though we haven't coded our movie controller yet, we can save, we can run a build, and we can actually execute this. Although we don't want to click on the add, edit, or delete buttons, because at this point, they're not going to work. So it did indeed display our list. We have a 4-column table. We've got our commands. Not going to click on them yet, though, because we don't have anything else coded. So I'm going to close that. And then we are going to move on because our next step is creating the movie controller. And so to do that, we're going to right click on controllers, add controller. And we'll do an empty one. And it's not going to be the home controller. We're going to call it movie controller. So it's super important you spell this right. Okay? Otherwise, your app breaks. Now, as far as the code that you need for this, I am actually giving you the code. So there is a link right here. And here is the code. It's a text file, so you can actually just copy and paste. Okay, so you can see I'm bringing in MVC models. I've got movie controller derived from controller. Here I've got that private context and the public CTX that I'm going to use. And then here you can see I've got an add action method, an edit, which is pulling in the ID. And I've got a get and a post. Okay, because with an edit, you need the ID so that it can retrieve the data and display it. Okay, so you can see I've got context.movies find. It's going to find the ID. Okay, so it's going to find all the data associated with that ID, store it in movie, and pass it to the view. The view is then going to display the data. If they change something and they submit that change, then it comes through post. And so post is not pulling in ID, it's pulling in a movie object, okay? Basically the filled in form. And as long as there is no errors, it'll go through this code. If there is an error, okay, then it goes through this code and it's going to go back to the edit view um, because there's a problem. So they have to fix their error. So here, basically, if the movie did not exist, okay, so if the movie ID is 0, which means it wasn't there, we're going to add it. Otherwise, if it's not 0, it means that the movie did exist and we update it. Okay, and then this is the command that will save the changes to the database. And then instead of displaying the edit again, we do a little redirection to go to the home controller and the index page. Okay, so that's kind of what's going on there in the edit. The add is pretty self-explanatory. So basically, the edit page can be used to edit, but it could also be used to add. So we are directing them to the edit view. And we've got new movies, so it's going to have 0 for a ID. Okay? And so they'll fill it in and they'll submit it. Where will it go? It'll go through this code, the same code that it goes through when it makes changes. Okay, and that's where this 0 comes into play, right? So if it was a new one, then it'll add it, otherwise it updates it. And then if there's an error, here it's checking to see the movie ID. So if it is 0, that means they're in the add mode. And if it's not, they were in edit mode. But either way, it goes back to that page and displays the error because they have to fix it. We've got delete here where we're pulling in an ID. So we're doing that same find command that we did before. And then we're taking all of that movie data and it's displaying it in the view, or we're passing it to the view. The view can choose how much of it it wants to display. And then we have a post. So they are going to see the data that will be deleted. And if they confirm the deletion, then it goes through this post. And this is where the row is actually removed. Okay, so here is the remove command. We're committing those changes, we're saving them, and then we redirect to the index. Okay, so that's basically what's going on in here. So I'm going to save, and I like to run a build after each one of these, just in case there was any kind of typo or issue. So now we have our controller, but we do not have our views. So we do need to create a movie folder in the views. So we're just going to right click on view. We're going to add, and we're going to do a new folder, and we're going to call it movie. So it's super important that we name these correctly. So if we have a movie controller, we need a movie folder. Okay. And so inside our movie view, we are going to have an edit and a delete. And remember, the edit is going to be used for adding and changing. So we're going to add a view, and we're going to call one of them edit. And we'll go ahead and do the other one. We're going to call the other one delete. And I happen to have code for both of these that you can copy paste. So here is the code for edit. And I'm copying it. Go over to my edit view. So this should start to look somewhat familiar. I have a view bag action that is being passed from the controller. And so if we look at the controller, we've got a view bag action of edit here, a view bag action of add. Okay, so here it's going to either take edit or add, and then it's going to say movie, and that's going to be the title. So it'll say add movie or edit movie, depending on which command they chose. And then you can see that we have a form. So it's going to display all of the errors at the top. Okay, and then we've got the name, the year, the rating, and the movie ID is hidden. Okay, and that is because they can't change it. And then we have our button, our submit button. And then we also have a cancel button. And for the cancel, we're wiring it to go to home and index. And the submit button works like any other submit. The view bag action is just the text that is going to display. So that's either going to be add or edit. But the submit will submit the form. So it's going to post the form, which means it'll go back through the controller using HTTP post. So if we look at the controller, get is what it uses when it first displays. So it's either going to be add or edit, and then it'll be post. That's after it's submitted. Okay, so I'm going to save this. And then we have code for the deletion view, which I'm going to copy. It's right here. And let me pull up delete. Okay, so we're connecting it to our movie model. And we got a little title of delete movie. And so we're displaying the model name and the year. So the name of the movie and the year. That's pretty much all we're displaying here. And then you can see that we've got the ID, which is hidden, so they can't see it, but we have to have that ID so that we know which movie to delete. So, and then here's the actual submit button. Okay, and then if they cancel, it'll just go to home and index. But if they do submit, then it's going to go back through the controller. Okay, it has that ID, and it's going to run through the delete here. So I'm going to save this, run a build. Okay, and so at this point, I should be able to run this. Let me pull it over. I should be able to add a movie. Oops. Oh, I love my edits. Okay, 1889. Okay, that's a weird year. So let's go ahead and go with that. Let's test the edit. Okay, we'll update the year. And it picked that up, and now let's delete it. All right, so it all works.